Multiplying and dividing by integers. In this video, you will be learning about multiplying and dividing integers. There are three basic rules that apply to multiplying integers. If you have the product of two integers with the same sign, the answer is positive. So in this example, we have 2 times 4. They're both positive, so my answer is positive 8. If I take negative 2 times negative 4, then I also get a positive 8. The product of two integers with different signs gives you a negative product. So you have a positive 2 and a negative 4. That's going to give me a negative product, or negative 8. The same is true of the reverse. So negative 2 times positive 4 would give me a negative product, negative 8. And the other rule that has to do with multiplying integers is the product of any integer and 0 is always 0. So 2 times 0 is 0. Or even negative 2 times 0 is 0. Remember, 0 is neither negative nor positive. Here's a table that illustrates the three rules. Multiplying two positive integers gives you a positive answer. Multiplying two negative integers gives you a positive answer. Any combination of one negative and one positive will always give you a negative product. Let's do some translating and solve some integer multiplication problems. The product of 12 by 5, right? Product is the operation, and we're multiplying 12, remember I always go left first, by 5. Right? Both are positive, so we have same signs. Right? 12 times 5 gives me 60, and that's my answer. Now again, I have a product of negative 4 by negative 10. Again, we're looking at same signs. 4 times 10 is 40. Because they were both the same sign, I'm going to leave it positive. Here's another example. The product of 6 by negative 22. Now here I have different signs. Go ahead and do your multiplication, which 6 times 22 is 132. We go back and look at the signs. Because one's negative and one's positive, my product needs to be negative. And that would be this rule here. Now I have the product of negative 7 by 50. Okay, so we have a negative and a positive. My solution is going to be negative. So I'm going to go ahead and multiply 7 times 50, and I get 350. This rule tells me that the answer or the product is negative, so negative 350. Let's do one more example. The product of 12 by negative 40. Right, which rule are we talking about? This one here. Means I'm going to have a negative solution. So 12 times 40 is 480. And I'm going to give it a negative sign because I have different signs. So my answer is negative. Now the last rule that we learned about with multiplying was multiplying by 0. If I take a number and multiply it by 0, I get 0. That means that any number, like 3 times 0, will give me 0. It's like saying I have 3 groups of 0 items. Well, I have 0 items. Let's talk about dividing. The cool thing about multiplying and dividing integers is you can use the same set of rules. You'll notice that this table is the same as the multiplication table that we created up here. The only difference is that my sign is division. So two positives make a positive, two negatives make a positive, and any combination of one negative and positive gives me a negative quotient. Here are the three rules. The quotient of two integers with the same sign is positive. The quotient of two integers with different signs is negative. So here's 2 positive gives me a positive quotient. 2 negative gives any combination of a negative and a positive gives me a negative quotient. And the last rule here is the quotient of 0 in any non-zero integer is 0. So if I take 0 and I divide it by 4, I'm always going to get 0. If I take 0 and divide it by -4, this is also true. So it doesn't matter what the sign is, I'm always going to get 0. So let's do a couple of examples. The quotient of 28 by 14, right? I'm talking about the operation being division, and I have 28 by 14. So 28 divided by 14 is 2. Right? To choose my sign, I look, they have the same sign, so I'm going to leave it positive. Now in the second example, I have the quotient of 65 by -5. Right? I'm going to go ahead and do my division, and I get 13. 5 goes into 65 13 times. If I look at my signs, I have different signs. And when I have different signs, so I'm looking at this rule here, my quotient is negative, so it's -13. Next problem is the quotient of -26 by 13. Right, I'm looking at this particular rule. Go ahead and do my division. 26 divided by 13 is 2. Because they're different signs, I'm going to make it -2. So here I have a negative divided by a positive. They're different signs, so my answer is negative. The last problem is the quotient of -72 by -36. This is going to follow this rule. Go ahead and do your division. 72 divided by 36 is 2. Because I have a negative divided by a negative, my answer is going to be positive. So it's +2. Now here's a watch out when it comes to division. Let's think about dividing by 0. To do that, let's think about these division as a multiplication problem. If I have 12 divided by 3, that means there's something times 3 that equals 12. What times 3 equals 12? Well, 3 times 4 gives me 12. So the answer to this division problem is 4. Right? If I take 12 and divide it by 4, what times 4 equals 12? Well, 4 times 3 equals 12. So the answer to this division problem is 3. Now let's look back at our third rule. The quotient of 0 in any non-zero integer is 0. Right? That's a problem just like this. I have the quotient of 0 in a non-zero integer. It's saying that my answer should be 0. Well, why is that true? What times 3 gives you 0? Well, 3 times 0 equals 0. So that's why this is true. Now here's the watch out. What happens if I have 3 divided by 0? Well, here's the question I'm asking. What times 0 equals 3? What times 0 equals 3? There is nothing I can multiply by 0 to get 3, because anything multiplied by 0, our rule says, is 0. So there is no solution. Which means the rule is that you cannot divide an integer by 0. You'll get no solution, and this is why. This is the end of the video on multiplying and dividing integers.